She only wanted a job, but what she found was a forbidden love that almost cost her freedom. Clara entered the gates of Vindali Palace with a heavy heart. She was the new nanny for little Princess Amelia, nothing more. Raised in a forgotten village, far from the luxuries of nobility, Clara always knew her life would be one of simplicity. Her fate seemed sealed when she accepted the job at the palace, taking care of the princess daughter, Alexander, a man known for his coldness since his wife's death. But gradually, what was routine turned into something unexpected. The discreet glances, the smiles that escaped the hallways, and the late-night conversations were building a feeling Clara never imagined she would experience. Alexander, in turn, fought against his own fears and the pain that consumed him. However, the young nanny's presence was like a breath of life in the gloomy castle. One day, during a storm, Alexander found Clara in the library, telling stories to Amelia. For the first time, he saw a genuine smile on his daughter's face, something he thought he had lost forever. At that moment, he realized that Clara was not only taking care of Amelia but also of his own heart. But not everything was allowed in the world of royalty. The rumor of a romance between the prince and the commoner soon spread. Advisors demanded explanations, and Clara found herself facing the threat of being expelled or even imprisoned. That was when Alexander, determined to protect the one he loved, declared before everyone, "If loving is a crime, then accuse me too, because I love her." Against traditions and judgments, the prince and the nanny fought for the right to live their pure and transformative feeling. In the end, the kingdom learned that true love does not choose title or birth, and that sometimes the greatest nobility lies in the courage to follow one's heart. Coming from a forgotten village, raised by her seamstress grandmother, Clara did not know what luxury was. Her life had always been marked by simplicity, patched fabrics, modest meals, and stories told by the fireplace. From an early age, she learned to value the little she had to nurture small but genuine dreams. When she received the offer to work at Cinderella Palace, she hesitated. The place seemed like a distant world, full of protocols and judgmental glances. But the job as nanny to Princess Amelia was a unique chance to provide a better life for the grandmother who had done so much for her. However, everything changed the moment she saw Prince Alexander. He was not what Clara had imagined. He did not have the haughtiness expected of a man who bore the crown. Instead, there was an aura of loneliness, a coldness that seemed to protect him from any closeness. His eyes, though firm, carried a silent pain, the result of a grief the palace insisted on ignoring. At that moment, Clara knew that her life would never be the same. It was not just the prince's imposing presence but the inexplicable desire to bring back the smile he seemed to have forgotten. Something inside her awoke an impulse to heal that wounded soul, even knowing that getting too close could cost much more than just her heart. Without really knowing how or why, Clara realized that her path in the palace would not be just about caring for the little princess. It would also be a journey to discover what love was and what it could transform. In the beginning, he barely greeted her. He just watched from a distance, with his rigid posture and usual impassive expression. To Clara, this was nothing new. Alexander was known for keeping his distance, especially since the pain of grief had enveloped him like an impenetrable wall. She busied herself with taking care of little Amelia, focusing on her duties, but she couldn't help but feel the weight of those attentive eyes in the most unlikely moments, when she told bedtime stories, when the girl laughed awkwardly, or when she sang village songs while brushing the princess's long hair. Over time, Clara realized his eyes sought more than just vigilance. They sought refuge. There was something vulnerable and hidden behind that stern appearance. As if, for a few moments, Alexander allowed his wounded soul to breathe, watching her transform the castle's silence into laughter and warmth. One day, noticing the prince standing at the doorway of the music room, Clara dared to offer him a smile. To her surprise, he didn't look away. He said nothing, but at that moment, she knew. Her presence was not just tolerated, but perhaps desired. What began as a cold and distant relationship gradually became a silent game of glances that spoke more than words ever could. Without realizing it, Clara was opening the windows to Alexander's soul, bringing night to a heart that had long been locked away. A rainy afternoon changed everything. The gray sky hung heavily over Windari Palace, and the foggy windows echoed the persistent sound of raindrops hitting the glass. Clara had taken little Amelia to the library, a cozy refuge, surrounded by old books and forgotten stories. Sitting on the soft rug, the two were immersed in an enchanted tale. Clara made funny voices for the characters, and Amelia laughed heartily at the Nanny's enthusiasm. For the first time in a long while, the sound of laughter echoed through those austere walls. In the hallway, firm footsteps slowed though. Alexander, drawn by the familiar sound of happiness that had long avoided the palace, paused at the slightly open door. He hesitated for a moment, as if afraid to interrupt that rare moment of joy. When he entered, he remained silent and just watched. He saw Clara acting out the story with exaggerated gestures and Amelia writhing with laughter. A timid smile formed on the princess's face. The scene seemed out of place in the melancholic reality he knew. Clara noticed his presence and, for a second, fell silent, embarrassed. But Alexander said nothing, just continued observing, as if he didn't want it to end. For the first time, she realized that his eyes weren't seeking control, but peace. That rainy afternoon, Clara understood that she was bringing something the priest had forgotten, the feeling of lightness, of life pulsating through the palace corridors. And Alexander, silent, just wished that moment would last a little longer. For the first time, Clara saw a trace of life on his face. A shy smile, a pause in the pain. Alexander's expression, which always seemed distant and impenetrable, softened momentarily. He was there, in the same space as her and Amelia, but something had changed. It wasn't just the cozy atmosphere or the sound of the little girl's laughter. It was the way the priest seemed more human, less trapped by his own scars. Clara, who had once felt like a distant observer of his pain, now saw that something had shifted in him. The rigidity in his gaze had dissipated for a second, giving way to a trait as subtle as a smile, but that meant more than words could express. Chimmy seemed to stretch. Clara felt an unexpected warmth flood her chest, something she couldn't explain. What had once seemed like a bond of mere carry duty now transformed into something deeper, more connecting. It was a silent exchange, unnoticed by everyone but Itesi. In that moment, something lit up between them, two nameless, but inevitable. Clara didn't know what it was, but she felt the strength of the connection, like a flame starting to warm what had been cold and distant for so long. She couldn't say exactly what had changed, but she knew that from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same, and neither she nor Alexander could go back. Chimmy made grow what they tried to hide. What began as furtive glances and hesitant words transformed into encounters that could no longer be avoided. Sometimes, they were just small moments, a shared smile in the hallway, a light conversation about the weather or what Amelia had done that day. But over time, those encounters became longer. The words were no longer rushed or avoided, but flowed naturally, as if Chimmy had no hurry. The silences, once uncomfortable, now carried something deeper. There was a silent intimacy between them, something that couldn't be said, but that both of them felt. When they found themselves in a secluded corner of the palace, their presence to each other became so consuming that the world seemed to disappear. But behind all of this, Clara's heart carried a cruel reminder: she was just the nanny. She knew that no matter how strong their feelings grew, her place in the palace remained unchanged. She was nothing more than a woman without titles, without noble lineage, hired to care for a child. It was an impossible love, forbidden by conventions, and each glance she exchanged with Alexander, each word shared, was a silent reminder that, no matter how much she wished, she could never be more than it. And yet, Clara couldn't stop herself. What was growing between them was bigger than the walls she tried to build around her heart. She knew she could never be his, but every moment by his side, her heart surrendered even more. Still, Alexander began to change. At first, Clara had gotten used to his coldness, to the almost impenetrable distance he kept. He, the priest, never allowed himself to be touched by anything other than his responsibility or duty. But over time, what once seemed impossible began to happen, quietly, subtly. He started seeking her company, not in an imposed or forced way, but subtly. When he saw her in the corridors, he no longer avoided eye contact, no longer rushed by like before. On the contrary, he would stop, sometimes even starting a conversation, something trivial, like talking about the organization of the upcoming ball or the well-being of Princess Amelia. But as time passed, those encounters became more frequent, longer. He asked for her opinion, no longer just about the palace routine or simple matters, but about more personal things. "What do you think of the new garden project?" he asked one day, his gaze seeking more than an answer. "What was your life like before you came to the palace?" he asked another time, in an unexpected conversation at the table. Each was these small gestures, these casual questions, that said everything. Because, unlike before, when he seemed indifferent to her existence, now he wanted to know who she was, what she thought, how she saw the world. Clara, not knowing exactly how to respond, began to realize that something was changing between them. The prince wasn't just getting closer out of curiosity. He was slowly letting himself be touched by her story, by her presence. In that simple act of asking, of seeking her company, he was saying what words still hadn't dared to reveal. He needed her. Then came the scandal. Like an unexpected storm, it spread quickly through the palace, entering the corridors and infecting the whispers of the people. Clara, who until then had been just the nanny, saw her name dragged into the heart of slander. A royal advisor, in a veiled act of vengeance, accused her of manipulating the priest, of entangling in a web of seduction and deceit. The words spread like poison, poisoning the ears of the court members and tarnishing the image Clara had been trying to build. She was called before the council, the weight of the accusation hanging over her shoulders. Fear, like a shadow, settled in her chest, but she tried to keep her composure. In that moment, more than ever, she knew that what was at stake wasn't just her honor, but also the possibility of losing everything she held dear: the princess trust, her connection with little Amelia, the life she had begun to build in the palace. The silence in the council room was heavy. Every word she spoke seemed to be analyzed, every gesture of hers amplified. The accusations were fierce, and the growing pressure made her hands sweat. She could be expelled, cast out of the place where her heart finally felt at home. Or she could be imprisoned, accused of plotting against the royal family as the advisor claimed. She looked at the prince, hoping for some sign, some word of defense, but he was distant, standing in silence. Clara felt the weight of the world on her. But one thing she knew: no matter what happened, she would face the judgment with the same courage she had always faced her own life. Deep though, she still believed that the truth, no matter how distorted that moment, would find its way. The atmosphere in the room was tense, as if the air had become dense and heavy. Clara felt the weight of the accusations pressing against her chest, each word thrown at her like a sharp stone. The voices of the advisors echoed, cutting through the silence of the room, and the gaze of the onlookers seemed more condemning than any sentence. She was alone. But then, suddenly the doors burst open, interrupting the flow of words and bringing an unexpected presence. Alexander entered the room with the authority of someone determined to change the course of history. He looked at Clara, and his eyes were no longer cold or distant. There was something there, something that made her believe, in that moment, that he would defend her with everything he had. He approached her, stopping by her side, and the murmurs in the room ceased instantly. The entire room was now silent, watching the priest's every move. He positioned himself, facing the accusers one by one, with a firmness Clara had never imagined seeing in him. Then, with the calm of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, he spoke, his voice strong and clear. If loving her is a crime, then accuse me too, because I love her. His words hit the air like a blow, cutting through the tension with the force of a sword. Clara felt her heart race, not only from the surprise but from the strength of his gesture. He loved her, and he was not afraid to show it. The advisor stood frozen, unsure how to react. There was no room for doubt now, nor for accusations. Alexander had laid everything bare, and the weight of his words was stronger than any judgment. Clara didn't say anything, but when she looked at him, she felt that the world had turned upside down. Amidst the confusion, the scandal, and the pain, love had risen like a shield, and now, nothing else mattered. After that day, nothing was the same. The accusation, the prince's defense, and the words he had spoken reverberated through the palace, causing the court to divide like never before. Some supported Alexander's decision, seeing it as an act of courage and love. Others, more traditional, didn't accept that the prince was involved with a woman of such humble origin, a mere nanny. The division was clear. Intentions grew with each passing day. The press, always eager to exploit any twist, reacted fervently. Headlines, articles, and rumors spread through the newspapers, each trying to capture the essence of the scandal, some attacking the relationship between Clara and Alexander, others defending her as a symbol of resistance against the strict norms of royalty. Every word written became a weapon, and the palace stood at the center of the storm. But each was the people who, without asking, without pressure, began to show where their hearts truly lay. They saw Clara not merely as the nanny who cared for little Amelia, but as a woman who dared to challenge a system of unyielding rules in the name of love. The way she cared for the princess, her constant look of concern and affection, her simple and honest manner, all of this began to touch the hearts of the people. And little by little, the people began to root for her. In the streets, in the squares, in the small towns around the palace, people spoke of her. She deserves to be happy, they said. Her love is real, they claimed. Posters began to appear with words of support, and even drawings made by children who saw her as a true heroine. Clara, once an invisible figure in the shadows of the palace, was now becoming a symbol of courage and genuine love. Although the court remained divided, there was one undeniable thing: the people's hearts were with her. And, little by little, the support would turn into the strength needed to change the course of things. Soon after, what everyone feared happened. Amelia fell ill. A high, persistent fever took hold of the young princess, leaving her weak and pale. Clara, always so attentive, didn't take her eyes off the little girl. The nights dragged on, and she didn't rest. At every sigh from the princess, Clara shrank with worry. 3 sleepless nights. 3 nights where Clara stayed by Amelia's side, holding her hand, offering comfort in soft words. The concern on the young Nanny's face was evident. She didn't bear to imagine what would happen if something were to happen to the girl. Her feelings of care and affection for Amelia ran deep. She wasn't just the nanny, she was the one Amelia trusted, her constant source of support. It was when Alexander entered the room, that silent early morning, that the scene paralyzed him. He saw her there, by his daughter's bedside, holding her hand with tenderness, her eyes filled with a desperation he never imagined seeing. The image of Clara, there, being the mother Amelia needed at that moment, touched his heart in a way he never anticipated. And then, for the first time since his wife's death, Alexander broke down in tears. The weight of loss, the fear of losing his daughter too, and, above all, the realization that Clara wasn't just caring for Amelia, but, in a way, for his entire life as well, left him completely vulnerable. He knelt beside the bed, through his tears, whispered words of gratitude and love that Clara never knew he could say. In that moment, Clara understood that, amid the pain and suffering, something profoundly transformative was happening between them. Not just because of the love that was growing, but because of the bond that united them in a common fight to save what they loved most. He knelt beside the bed, his eyes brimming with tears and his expression marked by silent pain. Clara looked at him, still holding Amelia's hand, feeling the weight of every passing second. The tension, the worry, everything seemed to have built up in that moment. Alexander was there, finally vulnerable, and she, somehow, was by his side, sharing the burden. Then, he whispered, his voice choked, "I don't know who saved you, but I know that without you, we would be lost." His words cut through the heavy air, and Clara felt something she never imagined she would feel. Something deeply quiet, a mix of relief, love, and acceptance. For the first time, she realized that, even though she was only the nanny, she had been part of something much bigger, not just as a caretaker, but as someone fundamental to the balance of the family. The warmth of his words touched her heart in a way she couldn't explain. She looked at him, her eyes still filled with worry, but now with a new understanding. Maybe, just maybe, she deserved that love. Until that moment, Clara had seen herself as merely a bystander in the real lives of the prince and his daughter. Always on the sidelines, always at a distance, just an invisible support, but never a protagonist. But now, something was changing. Alexandresse once planted a seed of hope, a small glimpse of a love she had thought impossible for someone like her. In that moment, the doubt she had carried was replaced by a single truth. Maybe fate had brought her there to be more than she ever imagined. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally the place where she truly belonged. But the battle was far from over. Although the people had begun to support Clara, and the court remained divided, there was an unyielding force that threatened to drive her away from everything she was beginning to build. The Queen Mother, a cold and unyielding woman, the embodiment of all the rigid, ancient traditions of royalty, was not willing to relent. She saw Clara not only as a threat to her authority but to the entire established order within the palace and the kingdom. With a stern gaze and sharp words, the Queen Mother demanded that Clara be removed from the royal circle. She declared, without hesitation, that the people would never accept a commoner without noble blood as queen. To her, lineage was everything, an inheritance that could not be broken, a rule that could not be challenged. The weight of her arguments reverberated through the house of the palace, and her allies, fearful of change, began to move in the shadows, creating an even greater atmosphere of tension. Clara, who had begun to feel like a part of that family, once again found herself at the center of a conflict much larger than she had ever imagined. The Queen Mother not only wanted to protect her daughter in the tradition of the kingdom but also to ensure that no one from the outside, no one without the right blood, could occupy such an important place by the princess's side. Clara, an ordinary woman, a mere nanny, was the embodiment of everything she despised. And for her, that woman could never become the future queen. But Clara did not yet know, at that moment, that her strength of will and the support of the people were about to make her a figure who could not easily be removed. She knew the road would be difficult, but she was ready to fight. And, with Alexander by her side, she was beginning to realize that true love did not bow to conventions of lineage or tradition. The battle was far from over, but Clara knew that, more than ever, she was not alone. When the pressure mounted, and the Queen Mother's words echoed through the palace house, Alexander didn't hesitate. He knew what he had to do. It would no longer be a silent discussion, nor a disguised gesture of support. He stood up and walked toward Clara, feeling the weight of expectations, tradition, and his own pain. It was time to take a definitive stand. He confronted her, but not with anger or resentment, but with the certainty of a man who had finally understood what truly mattered. He looked her in the eyes, with firm determination. He said, "I don't want a queen of blood, but of soul. I want a queen who makes me feel alive again, a queen who loves the kingdom and her family the same way I love her." Alexandre's words were like a relief to Clara, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had always known, deep though, that lineage didn't matter. What mattered was the connection, the commitment, and the love that, however unlikely, existed between them. For Alexander, it wasn't just about love for Clara, but about finding something he thought he had lost forever. He looked at his daughter, is she recovering? He realized that his own soul was healing. For the first time since his wife's death, he felt that the family was alive again. The pain was beginning to fade, and what remained was a new beginning, a new hope that he had never imagined possible. He knew the road would be hard, but he was willing to face it. Not for a title, not for a crown, but for a life that finally seemed to make sense. He didn't want a queen just for her lineage or appearance. He wanted a queen of heart, someone capable of bringing to the family the strength he had never imagined finding again. The pressure on the palace was immense. The house were filled with murmurs and looks of distrust. The queen mother, determined to maintain her traditional view, had done everything she could to push Clara away from the court. But what no one expected, what no one could have imagined, was that the people, at last, would make their voices heard. Letters began to arrive at the palace gates. At first, small, simple, almost discreet. But soon they became a flood of words y feliz. Ordinary people, those whom Clara had touched without knowing, wrote letters expressing support, gratitude, and the desire to see her as part of the royal family. What was even more surprising were the children. With their pure little hearts, they started sending drawings of the princess as Nanny, drawings full of vibrant colors, with Clara smiling beside the princess, with Prince Alexander, all together, forming a family that seemed real and strong. The children didn't see the difference between noble blood and a genuine heart. To them, Clara was as much a part of the kingdom as any royal family member. And then something even more powerful emerged. A movement, modest at first, but soon spreading throughout the nation. In the streets, in the squares, in the schools, people began to gather in support of Clara. Posters, hashtags, t-shirts. What started as a simple act of support turned into a collective shout. King of the art. The people didn't care about blood or lineage. They saw something the court had ignored, the strength of the heart. The genuine connection, the love Clara brought to the prince, to the princess, into the kingdom. The people knew that, more than a title, more than a name, it was this courage, this empathy, and this love that made Clara the true queen of their hearts. The pressure continued, but the movement grew, and, for the first time, Clara felt that the power to change was in her hands. The people were with her, in that, more than any title or convention, gave her the strength to keep fighting. The day of the engagement arrived, bringing with it an air of anticipation and emotion. The palace was dressed in light flowers, and the gardens, as if they sensed the magnitude of the moment, were filled with the fragrance of spring. The crowd gathered, all eager to witness what men considered a miracle, the union of two worlds that, at last, had found each other in the heart of one another. Clara, though nervous, was radiant. She wore a blue dress, blue like the sky after the storm, when the world seems to breathe a sigh of relief, as if a new era is about to begin. The blue symbolized the tranquility she finally felt in her heart, after so many obstacles and challenges, and the promise of a future where love could prevail over everything. Alexander, seeing her, felt a wave of emotion. The woman he loved, who defied all expectations and overcame the limits of what society thought possible, was there, before him, in all her strength and grace. The weight of the pressure on them seemed to lessen with each step Clara took toward him. The moment had come. When he finally kissed her, in front of the gathered crowd in the gardens, she seemed to stop. The kiss was gentle, but full of meaning, a promise made not only between them but with all those watching. The world around them seemed to sigh, as if, in that instant, the truth about the power of love had finally been revealed. Clara and Alexander's love was no longer just a private story, but a symbol for all those who believed that the heart, courage, and unity could break barriers and transform destinies. And so, in that kiss, their future, either of the kingdom, seemed to finally shine. There was no lost slipper, no fairy godmother appearing in a flash of magic to transform destiny. It wasn't a fairy tale story with a perfect easy ending. But what existed was something much more powerful, something that defies conventions e estanges de teste of time, courage. Courage to face condemning stares, courage to challenge tradition e the conventions of a world that insisted on placing barriers where love should thrive. Clara e Alexander were not characters in a magical dream. They were real people, with fears, insecurities, and a passion that could not be contained by the golden walls of a castle or the expectations of a court. There was struggle against a fate that seemed determined to keep them apart, struggle against conventions that saw them as incompatible, struggle against the voices whispering that each was all an illusion, but, above all, there was the struggle for truth, the truth of a love not defined by blood or status, but by the purity of the heart. In the end, it was not the glow of a glass slipper or the touch of a magic wand that brought them together. It was the strength of their choices, the resilience in the face of adversity, and, above all, the belief that true love is the kind that rises above all obstacles in their still being transformative. They challenged castles and traditions, and by doing so, created a story that, more than any fairy tale, became a legend of courage and true love. Months passed since that magical day, and the Palacio's celebration. The crown would finally be placed on Clara's head, but she knew the title was just a symbol. Her true coronation had happened long before, in the silent gestures, the courageous choices, in the unconditional love that she and Alexander had built together. The event was about to begin. Clara dressed elegantly, but humbly. The weight of the crown was not on her head, but in her heart, where she already felt more like a queen than she ever could have imagined. She had faced challenges that few would dare to confront, and alongside Alexander, she had discovered the true meaning of leadership in love. When, finally, the ceremony began, and Clara was about to receive the crown from her daughter's hands, something unexpected happened. Amelia, her eyes sparkling with emotion, ran to her, disregarding the protocols or the formality of the event. And, with the purity of a child's heart, she looked at Clara and simply said, "Mommy." Those words, simple and spontaneous, echoed louder than any royal coronation. The most important title, the one Clara had always dreamed of earning, was not the crown but Amelia's acceptance and genuine love. For Clara, that moment was more meaningful than any ceremonial event. She was not just a queen, she was a mother, and that was all that truly mattered. And so, the woman who once entered the palace merely as a nanny, someone seen as simple and insignificant, became the queen that the kingdom never imagined. Clara did not wear a crown as a symbol of her greatness, but rather the unconditional love she had offered to the princess, to her family, and especially to the prince. Her journey was not easy. She faced judging gazes, relentless criticism, and a fate that insisted on placing barriers where love should thrive. But she never bowed to the pressure of court expectations. She did what no one expected. She won not only Alexander's heart but the heart of an entire people. The kingdom learned from her that true love is not measured by a golden cradle or noble lineage, but by the courage to love without reservation, without fear of challenges, and without fear of being judged. The love Clara offered was genuine, pure, and unconditional. She gave herself to a true love, a love that did not depend on titles or status, but on the strength of her soul. When Clara became queen, she did not use her power to impose rules or traditions. She used her heart, her kindness, and her courage to teach the kingdom what true love really meant. She became a symbol of transformation, showing everyone that true power does not come from authority, but from the love that spreads and multiplies. And so, the woman who entered as a nanny, with a simple smile and a heart full of hope, became the queen who taught the kingdom the greatest legacy, that the purest and strongest love is the one that defies everything, comes from within, and gives you the courage to be who we truly are.